What if a $1 ranch came with a deadly secret? When Gideon Rourke opened the front door, he wasn't just stepping into a dusty old house, he was walking into a trap set 3 years ago. A mysterious woman. Ruthless outlaws. A gold mine worth killing for. And a past that refuses to stay buried. This isn't just another Wild West tale, it's a fight for truth, justice, and redemption. Stay with us, because what happens next will leave you breathless. Some things just don't sit right with a man, even if the ink's dry and the handshake's done. Gideon Rourke should have felt triumphant that day, the day he officially became the owner of 120 acres of weathered Arizona land, nestled at the edge of the Painted Desert. A handshake, a signature, and a crumpled $5 bill were all it took. That, and a hollow promise from a stranger who couldn't quite meet his eyes. Folks in town muttered it was cursed land traded hands too often, always sold for less than it was worth. But Gideon, a man shaped by loss and hardened by war, wasn't one to spook easy. He'd seen men gutted on foreign soil, held his dying wife in his arms through a bitter winter, and come back to a country that had long since forgotten his name. So, no, a little superstition didn't scare him. If anything, it called to him. The sun blazed down as he drove his mule cart over the cracked path, clouds of dust swallowing the wheels. His bones ached with every bump, but the pain was almost welcome proof he was still moving, still chasing something worth building. From the crest of the hill, he finally laid eyes on the ranch. It looked abandoned, as promised, perhaps even more so. The house sagged under the weight of years, with the chimney half cracked and wooden beams that moaned under the wind. The fencing had collapsed in places, twisted like the ribs of some ancient beast. And yet to Gideon, it was a kingdom. He stepped out, boots crunching dry dirt, heart beating steady with the satisfaction of a man who had earned every inch of this moment. But that feeling didn't last long. A whisper of unease crawled up his spine. It started small, just a feeling like being watched. The air was too still. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. On the porch, he spotted footprints. Not just any footprints. Bare feet. Small. A woman's, perhaps. Fresh enough, the dust hadn't yet claimed them. He felt the shift immediately went from landowner to intruder in the span of a heartbeat. He pulled his revolver from its worn holster. His eyes scanned the shadowed windows, searching for movement. Nothing. But every instinct in him screamed this house was not empty. Inside, the air was thick, still warm. Dust floated in golden shafts of sunlight like tiny spirits caught mid-prayer. He moved quietly through the entryway past an overturned chair into the kitchen. Then he saw the kettle. Still warm. Still wet around the spout. Someone had just made tea. He backed toward the center of the room, gun raised. That's when it came soft footsteps overhead. Deliberate. Measured. Trying not to be heard, but not quite careful enough. A chill ran through his body. Not fear, exactly. Something older. Like the feeling you get when you realize a photograph on the wall just changed. And then she appeared. She came to the top of the staircase without sound, as if she'd grown from the shadows. Mid-30s, dark auburn hair falling in loose waves over her shoulders, a linen blouse that had seen better days, and a stare that dared him to blink first. Gideon didn't lower the gun, but he didn't raise it either. "You must be Gideon Rourke," she said. He said nothing. "I saw you down by the gate this morning," she continued. "Didn't think you'd make it all the way up. Most don't." His voice cracked slightly from the dry air. "Who are you?" "My name is Emmaline Shaw." She stepped slowly down the stairs, each step groaning beneath her weight. "And I've been taking care of this place." Gideon narrowed his eyes. "That's funny. Boone Carter told me it was abandoned." Her smile was faint, almost pitying. "Boone Carter doesn't know half the things he pretends to. He sold you a deed, yes. But there are things about this land no paper can hold. She passed him and moved toward the kitchen table, pulling out a chair and sitting like she owned the place. Like he was the one interrupting. "I ain't looking for trouble," he said at last. "Neither am I," she replied, her voice quiet. "But that doesn't mean trouble isn't coming." He holstered his revolver slowly, but didn't sit. He studied her, the hard line of her jaw, the sun-worn skin, the subtle tremble in her fingers. "You live here alone, for now," she said. "But that never lasts." She poured water into a tin mug and pushed it toward him. "You came here for peace, Mr. Rourke. I hope you find it. But this place, it keeps its own kind of peace, the kind that costs you." Outside, the wind kicked up dust in little spirals across the yard. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out. Gideon finally took the mug, sat down across from her. "What kind of trouble are we talking?" Her eyes locked with his. Not pleading, not warning, just the truth. "The kind that doesn't knock," she said. "The kind that waits until you think you're safe. Then it rides in, like it owns the sky." And right then, Gideon realized something he hadn't let himself believe in a long time. He wasn't just sitting at a stranger's table. He was sitting at the beginning of a story that would change everything. And if the price of peace was blood, he'd already paid too much to walk away now. He looked around the room again, wooden floorboards worn by generations old wallpaper peeling away like secrets unwilling to stay buried. A family once lived here. Children may have played where shadows now lingered. This wasn't just a house, it was a witness, a keeper of stories. "What's really going on here, Emmaline?" He asked this time, not as a landowner, but as a man who needed the truth more than he needed comfort. She met his gaze, no longer hiding. "You ever felt like you walked into someone else's life by accident, Gideon? Like fate held the door open, and now you're standing in a storm meant for somebody else?" He nodded slowly. "More times than I care to count." She nodded back. "Then you'll understand why I can't leave, and why you might not want to stay." The sun dipped behind the cliffs, casting the first long shadows of twilight, the kind of light that made every truth look softer, but every danger harder to ignore. And somewhere out there across the brush and sandstone something was moving, watching, waiting. Gideon Rourke had bought a ranch, but what he'd really bought was a war, and it had just begun. The next morning came slow and heavy the way it always does after a night filled with unanswered questions. Gideon sat on the front steps, sipping black coffee from a tin cup, the kind that left grit on your tongue, but cleared your head all the same. The painted desert stretched out before him, endless and quiet like a sleeping god. He'd barely slept. The old house creaked all night, like it was breathing, groaning with stories that hadn't been told in years. But it wasn't the house that kept him up, it was her, Emmaline Shaw, the way she'd spoken calm and resolute, like the land had chosen her and not the other way around. Inside, she moved about the kitchen like someone used to silence. No music, no humming, just the soft clatter of a spoon against a pan, a rhythm older than comfort. She made cornbread and eggs like it was a sacred act, then set a plate down in front of him without a word. "You sleep, Annie?" she asked, finally, sitting across from him. "Barely," he admitted. "Too many ghosts in these walls." She nodded, but said nothing. Just kept her eyes fixed on him like she was still trying to decide whether or not he belonged. He cut into the cornbread and paused. "You said there are things about this land no deed can hold, that it's not really abandoned. What did you mean?" She took a long breath, her eyes drifting to the window. "This land, it remembers, it holds on to things, pain, secrets, blood." He leaned forward. "You talk like it's alive." Emmeline's lips curved in the faintest smile. Maybe not alive, but not dead either, just waiting. He watched her closely, waiting for what she stood and walked toward the hearth, kneeling by a loose board in the floor. With practiced ease, she lifted it to reveal a hidden compartment beneath. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were old documents, maps, deeds, letters yellowed by time. Gideon rose to his feet, heart thudding. "What's that?" She laid the documents out on the table, smoothing them with care. "This ranch used to belong to my father, Caleb Shaw. He worked this land until it nearly killed him. Then one day some men from Prescott showed up with forged claims, said he owed money, said the land wasn't his anymore." Gideon looked down at the survey maps. They were detailed, hand-drawn with notes in the margins about water tables and mineral veins. They took everything, she continued. The house, the horses, even the grave where my mother was buried, said it wasn't legal ground. He felt his fists clench. "What happened to your father?" "He died in a cave-in. That's the story they told. But I found his journal. He wrote about threats, men following him, warning him to keep quiet." Gideon sat back down, trying to wrap his mind around it all. "You think he was murdered?" She nodded. "And I think they're still looking for these." She tapped the documents. "Because this isn't just land. There's gold here. My father found it, mapped it, and planned to file the claim the right way." He exhaled slowly. "That's why Carter sold it so cheap." He knew. He knew, Emmaline confirmed. But he also knew anyone who stayed long enough to dig would start asking the wrong questions. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, like it too remembered something it wasn't supposed to. Then Emmaline said, "You could leave, walk away, pretend this never happened." Gideon met her eyes. "I've been running my whole life. Lost a wife, lost a war, lost a reason to fight. But this feels like something worth standing for." She gave a small, grateful nod. "Then we should start preparing." That afternoon, they worked the land together, repaired what fences they could, reinforced the doors, dug out the old root cellar just in case. The work was hard, but it did something to the air, filled it with purpose. Emmaline showed him the rest of her father's maps, including a hidden spring up near the ridge and a buried rifle cache from an old neighbor who'd never returned to claim it. Bit by bit, the ranch began to feel less like a trap and more like a battlefield waiting for its day. As the sun dipped low, painting the cliffs in red and gold, Gideon stood on the porch watching the horizon. He saw them then, 3 riders far off in the distance, just specks of movement against the flat earth. Too far to tell who they were, but not too far to know they were headed straight for the ranch. He called for Emmaline. She joined him, squinting into the fading light. "It's too early," she whispered. "Too early for what? For them to find me." She turned away and walked back inside without another word. And that's when Gideon knew whatever storm was coming, it had already begun. And this land, this broken, beautiful land, was about to wake from its long sleep. The morning air carried a strange unease with it, like a whisper you couldn't quite make out. It wasn't just the smell of distant smoke or the way the wind rattled the porch boards. It was something deeper. Gideon stood at the edge of the ranch house, his eyes fixed on the eastern trail, where dust still hung in the air like a memory. The riders hadn't returned last night, but that didn't mean they were gone. No men like that didn't retreat. They waited. Inside, the house felt quieter than usual. Emmaline moved about with a heaviness that Gideon hadn't seen before. She barely touched her coffee, and every creak in the floorboards seemed to set her nerves on edge. Gideon kept glancing at her from behind the woodpile where he was stacking logs he didn't really need. He was waiting for her to speak for the truth to surface. Finally, he broke the silence. Who were they, Emmaline? The men from yesterday. Who's out there? She didn't look up right away. When she did, her eyes were steady, but there was something behind them, a pain she didn't try to hide. Wade Harper. He works for the Maddox brothers. Gideon didn't flinch. That name's known even in Colorado. Smuggling forgery land grabs bad blood. They killed my father. Emmaline said the words simple but final. And they'll kill me if they think I still have the proof. Gideon sat down slowly. What proof? She rose from her chair, her boots barely making a sound across the wooden floor. At the fireplace, she knelt and pried up a floorboard. Beneath it was a thick oilskin bundle. She unwrapped it carefully as if the papers inside might crumble at a touch. Maps, coordinates, a deed, and a leather pouch with the name Thomas Shaw burned into the side. My father spent 10 years mapping every inch of that mine, Emmaline said. These documents prove the claim was his. The Maddox brothers forged new paperwork and claimed it as theirs after they killed him in a staged collapse. Gideon held the documents carefully. He had seen a lot in his life: wars, betrayal. Good men broken, but nothing quite like this. This was legacy. This was a man's life charted out with ink and sweat. You kept all this hidden here, he asked. 3 years, she said. Every day, waiting for them to come. I figured they'd forgotten, but yesterday proved they hadn't. They spent the next few hours hiding the most crucial pages under the hearthstone, then burning false leads to confuse anyone who might come looking. The rest they sealed in a saddlebag. The house felt like a trap now, not a refuge. By late afternoon, the wind died down. That's when the hooves came again, slow, deliberate. Gideon grabbed his rifle and stepped onto the porch. 3 riders emerged from the trail's curve. Wade Harper, tall and lean, dismounted first. His boots kicked up dust as he walked forward with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. Evenin', he said. We came for what's ours. Gideon didn't blink. You got the wrong place. Harper's lip curled. This place belonged to a thief and a liar. We're just settling old debts. Before Gideon could reply, the door creaked behind him. Emmaline stepped out, her revolver on her hip, her jaw tight. This land was my father's, she said. You and your kind stole his life. You're not taking what's left. Harper laughed, a cold, dead sound. Is that so? Then why don't you come down here and show me your proof? Emmaline didn't move. You'll never see it. Harper's hand hovered near his holster. Lady, I ain't here for games. You give us the papers, or we start digging until we find them. And if we don't, maybe we tear the place down to find what's hidden. Gideon stepped forward. You'll have to get through me first. The standoff hung in the dry air. Harper's men moved like shadows circling the house, slowly watching windows, counting steps. Then a distant sound, hooves again. Not from the trail behind, but from the east. Gideon turned his head slightly, squinting into the sunlight. Riders. 6 or more riding hard, the glint of sunlight catching on badge metal. Harper's bravado flickered. What's this? Gideon lowered his voice. The law. Sheriff Declan Warren led the charge, his long coat trailing behind him like a judge's robe. He'd once been a federal marshal, and he carried himself like a man who didn't need introductions. Wade Harper Warren shouted, You and your men are under investigation for conspiracy forgery and the murder of Thomas Shaw. Harper cursed under his breath. That damn sheriff's still breathing. The other riders fanned out. Rifles were drawn, and Harper's men suddenly looked less certain. Gideon turned to Emmaline. Get back inside. Take the documents. Go out the back if anything happens. She didn't move. This is my fight, too. The painted desert grew still. Even the wind held its breath. Harper's voice dropped. "We walk away now, or this ends bloody." Sheriff Warren raised his voice. "You fire a shot, Harper, and you'll hang before sundown. That's a promise." For a moment, Harper looked like he might take his chances. His hand twitched toward his gun. Gideon braced. But then Harper exhaled slowly and raised his hands. "Not today," he muttered. As Warren and his deputies moved in to arrest the men, Gideon felt the tension drain from his shoulders. The nightmare had reached their doorstep, but it had been turned away. Later, as the last of the riders disappeared into the distance, Emmaline stood beside Gideon on the porch. "I thought I'd be running forever," she said. "Maybe it's time you stayed," he replied. The painted desert stretched before them, red earth, open sky, and a silence that finally felt like peace. And for the first time in years, Emmeline Shaw believed that justice might finally find its way home. The sky was the color of dying embers, casting long shadows across the ranch house, as twilight settled into the painted desert. Gideon couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that had crept in with the falling sun. Even the air had changed thicker still and full of unspoken things. Somewhere out there in that great stretch of silence, danger was coiling like a snake ready to strike. He could feel it in his bones like an old ache passed down from generations of men who'd lived and died by the gun. Inside, Emmeline moved through the house with the practiced grace of someone who'd lived too long with fear. Her hands were steady as she lit the lanterns, but her eyes kept darting to the windows. Gideon watched her, his heart tight. They had both spent years running, he from grief, she from shadows. But tonight all roads had brought them here. This house, this stand, this reckoning. They sat at the table trying to eat, but the food went untouched. Their conversation was short, quiet. The kind that doesn't need words because everything's already been said with looks, with presence. Gideon reached for her hand, but Emmeline pulled away gently. "They're coming," she said. "I can feel it." He nodded. "Then we meet 'em head on." Midnight came like a whisper through the canyon, and with it the knock. Not a loud one, not a panicked one, but 3 slow, deliberate raps on the front door. The kind of knock that announces not a visitor, but an ending. Gideon rose and peered through the curtain. Wade Harper stood in the moonlight, calm, collected as if he had all the time in the world. Behind him were men, maybe 5, maybe more, holding their positions like trained wolves. He turned to Emmeline. "This might be the only chance we have to end this." She nodded. "Let them come." When Gideon opened the door, Harper grinned like a man greeting an old friend. "Evenin', Mr. Rourke," he said smoothly. "Thought we might continue our little discussion." "You brought a lot of company for a conversation," Gideon replied, his rifle visible, but lowered. Harper tipped his hat. Always good to be prepared. Gideon didn't step aside. He didn't invite him in. "You've made your intentions clear. Say what you came to say. The Maddox brothers want what's theirs," Harper said, smile fading. "Those papers. Hand them over and this all ends nice and quiet. They're not yours to take." Harper's eyes turned hard. "Then, I guess we're doing this the hard way." He stepped back and whistled. In an instant, shadows sprang to life. Gunmen emerged from behind Rock's trees and the barn. Gideon slammed the door and turned to Emmeline. "They're here." The first shot shattered the front window. Gideon dove behind the sofa, returning fire, as the room exploded in gunfire and shouts. The air filled with smoke and glass. Emmeline crouched beside the fireplace, her revolver steady. For all the chaos, she moved like a storm had passed through her long before this night. For what felt like hours, the ranch house became a fortress under siege. Each creak of the floor, each muffled footstep was a potential threat. Gideon and Emmeline held their ground, exchanging gunfire, ducking debris, patching wounds with torn cloth and spit. The attackers were relentless, but so were they. When the gunfire stopped, an eerie silence settled over the house. Gideon peered outside again. Bodies littered the front yard. Horses were gone, and Harper was nowhere in sight. "He'll regroup," Emmaline said, wiping blood from her arm. "That wasn't the last of him." "No," Gideon said, "but maybe we can make it his last." They used the lull to re-secure the house. Reinforced doors, reloaded weapons, bandaged wounds. There was no time for sleep, just preparation. The second attack came just before dawn. This time, Harper didn't wait. He charged the back door with a fury. Gideon met him, with his shoulder sending them both crashing to the ground. Fists flew, blood spilled. Emmaline shouted but couldn't get a clear shot. The fight was brutal. Years of running and rage poured into each punch. Harper landed a blow that sent Gideon reeling, but he came back with a broken chair leg, knocking the outlaw off balance. Then Emmaline stepped in, gun drawn. "Don't," Harper gasped, bleeding from the mouth. "You'll hang for it." "She won't," came a calm voice behind them. Sheriff Warren and 2 deputies stood in the kitchen, revolvers aimed. "Looks like we got ourselves a live one," the sheriff said, "and a witness to go with it." Harper froze. All that swagger and bluster drained from his face. He knew it was over. The sheriff cuffed him. The deputies began collecting weapons and wounded. Emmaline sank to her knees. Gideon helped her up. "It's done," he said. But Emmaline shook her head. "Not done, just beginning." She looked around at the damage, the bullet holes, the shattered windows, the blood-stained floor, and then out to the rising sun. For the first time in years, she saw the light not as a threat, but as a promise. "The longest night is over," she whispered, and beside her Gideon nodded. Together they watched the dawn break over the painted desert. The sunrise didn't just color the sky, it changed everything it touched. Light spilled across the painted desert like spilled gold, tracing every crack in the dry earth, every shattered window pane in Gideon Rourke's battered ranch house. And for the first time in years, Emmaline felt the sun's warmth not as a warning, but as a gentle promise that perhaps, just perhaps, they had survived the worst of it. Sheriff Warren stood on the porch, his badge catching the morning light, as his deputies finished securing the last of Harper's men. Some would need doctors, others jail cells, but none of them would return to threaten Emmaline again. The sheriff tipped his hat to her and Gideon. "You've got grit," he said simply. "Both of you. The kind we don't see much anymore." Gideon didn't respond right away. He was staring across the horizon, eyes squinting into the sun, as though he were trying to see the future unspooling before him. "We didn't have a choice," he said. "Sometimes the fight finds you whether you're ready or not." Inside the house, everything smelled of gunpowder and wood smoke. The floor was scuffed with boot marks, blood, and broken glass. Emmaline moved through it slowly, like she was walking through a memory she hadn't yet processed. At the fireplace, she reached for the floorboard and lifted it one final time. The oiled leather pouch and survey maps were still there, untouched. She held them out to the sheriff. This is what they were after. He didn't take them right away. "You sure you want to hand that over?" She nodded. "My father's truth shouldn't hide in the dark anymore." Sheriff Warren accepted the bundle gently, like it might burn his hands. "I'll see these get to the courthouse. This time, we'll make sure the law does what it should have done 3 years ago." As the lawmen rode off, Harper in shackles, his eyes hollow, Emmaline and Gideon stood side by side on the porch. The land before them looked the same as it had yesterday, but somehow everything was different. "You'll testify?" Gideon asked. "I will," she said. "It's time to stop running." He looked at her eyes, soft. And afterward, she didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped down from the porch and walked to the edge of the pasture, breathing deep the scent of morning grass and horses. The fence still needed mending, and the barn's roof would have to be patched before the rains came. But beneath the dust there was life here. Hope. Even love if it was allowed to bloom. "I've been taking care of this land a long time," she said, without turning around, "and now it's taken care of me." Gideon joined her at the fence. "I came here to build something for myself. Never figured it'd turn into this." She glanced at him, smiling for the first time in days. "Maybe you were building it all along. You just didn't know what it'd look like." The next days were a blur. Deputies came and went, taking statements, gathering evidence. Townsfolk brought supplies, food, lumber, even fresh clothes. For once, they weren't whispers about the widow who lived alone, or the stranger who'd bought a cursed ranch. They were neighbors, and they were proud. Emmaline and Gideon worked side by side. The porch was rebuilt, the window panes replaced. They cleaned the soot and the blood, but left one bullet hole in the wall as a reminder. A scar, Emmaline said, like the kind people carry. It tells the story even if you don't always want to hear it. On the third night, they sat under the stars, coffee cups in hand. The silence between them had grown comfortable. "You ever think Gideon began that maybe some places choose you?" Emmaline considered it. "This land was waiting. I just didn't know who I was waiting for. They didn't speak of love, not directly, not yet, but it hung in the air like the scent of rain before a summer storm. Gentle, steady, inevitable." A week later, Sheriff Warren returned. The documents had been authenticated. Charges had been filed. The Maddox brothers would stand trial. Justice, it seemed, was finally catching up. "You'll need to come to the Capitol," the sheriff said. "Tell your story. You ready for that?" Emmaline didn't hesitate. "I've been ready since the day they killed my father." The courthouse was grander than anything Gideon had seen, with white stone columns and polished wood benches, but Emmaline walked its halls like she belonged there. When she took the stand, her voice didn't waver. She told them about her father, the gold, claimed the betrayal, the forged papers. She spoke of running, of surviving, of hiding those documents under the floor, while men hunted her like an animal. And when she was done, the courtroom sat in silence. It took 3 days for the jury to return their verdict: guilty, on all counts. As the Maddox brothers were led away, Emmaline felt a strange emptiness in her chest. Not relief, not triumph, just the end of a long, painful chapter. Gideon stood beside her, his hand finding hers. "You did it," he said. "We did it," she corrected softly. Back at the ranch, the days turned warm, then hot. The grass grew taller, the sky a deeper blue. Gideon built a new corral. Emmaline planted flowers along the front steps. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the desert glowed red, Gideon turned to her. "You ever think about staying?" She laughed. "I've been staying. You're the one who hasn't said it out loud." "So say it," he replied. She reached out and took his hand. "This place is ours now. Not just the land, everything on it. The scars, the memories, the beginnings." He nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then, let's build it. Together." The painted desert stretched before them, quiet and vast. Somewhere beyond those red cliffs, other stories were beginning. But here, on a ranch once bought for $1, something stronger than vengeance had taken root. Hope, justice, and the promise of a future forged not in fear, but in faith. As the final rays of desert sun dipped below the jagged cliffs of the painted desert, the story of Gideon Rourke and Emmaline Delaney stood not just as a tale of survival, but as a reminder of the quiet strength that lives in all of us. What began with a mysterious ranch sold for $1 became a powerful journey through buried truths, lingering grief, and the rekindling of hope. Theirs was not a tale of grand victories or flashy heroism, but one rooted in grit, sacrifice, and the quiet resolve to do what's right no matter the cost. Gideon, a man looking only to escape the noise of the world and carve out a small space for himself, discovered that true solitude doesn't come from isolation, it comes from peace within, and Emmaline, whose past was littered with fear and injustice, found that sometimes you have to face the ghosts that haunt you to truly be free. Their lives intertwined not by chance, but by destiny, stitched together by the land the truth, and an unspoken understanding that healing is a journey best traveled with another. From the moment Gideon stepped onto that ranch and heard those quiet footsteps upstairs, the stage was set for a reckoning. We watched as he confronted the unknown, not with bravado, but with curiosity, and we saw Emmaline lower her defenses step by step as the shadows of her past grew longer. Together, they faced danger not just from men with guns, but from doubt's regrets, and the burden of justice long denied. They did not emerge unscathed, but they emerged stronger. When Sheriff Warren brought justice, not just with his badge, but with his belief in the truth, it showed us that systems can fail, but individuals can rise. Emmaline's testimony in court wasn't just for her father. It was for every silent voice that had been dismissed, every woman who had been hunted, every person who'd been told to run and hide instead of stand and fight. And perhaps, most powerful of all, it was a love story, not of sweeping romance, but of trust slowly earned. Gideon and Emmaline didn't fall in love under a full moon with violins playing. They found love in bullet-scarred walls and repaired fences, in quiet cups of coffee under starlit skies. In the honesty of hard conversations and the safety of knowing someone would stand by your side when danger knocked. Their story at its core is a reminder that the past will always echo, but it doesn't have to define us. That courage doesn't always wear a badge or carry a gun. Sometimes it just shows up every morning and chooses to keep going. Sometimes courage looks like planting flowers where bullet casings once fell. So, what can we learn from the Painted Desert first? Never underestimate the power of truth. Even when buried, even when hunted, it has a way of rising. Just as Emmaline's father recorded every inch of gold-veined land, truth leaves a trail for those brave enough to follow. Second justice isn't just a courtroom verdict. It's every choice to stand up for someone who can't. It's every time we say enough and mean it. And when systems fail as they sometimes do, it's people, honest, principled, ordinary people who can still carry the torch. Third, we are stronger when we walk beside someone. Whether it's a partner, a friend, or a neighbor, having someone who sees you, truly sees you, makes all the difference. Like Gideon, we might believe we're building something alone, but the right person can turn solitude into something sacred belonging. And finally, the past matters, but it's not the end. The scars we carry are not signs of weakness. They are proof that we survived. They are reminders of battles fought, of lessons earned in the hardest of ways. But beyond the scars lies something even greater, the future we choose to build. For those watching and listening to this tale from the comfort of your homes, take a moment to reflect on what it stirred in you. Was it a memory of someone you once loved and lost? A wrong that still needs righting? A place like that dollar ranch that feels like home despite the broken windows? You don't need to face down outlaws to be brave. You just need to do the next right thing. To mend what's broken. To believe even after years of running that you deserve peace. That the sunrise can still bring justice and love with it. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of what matters most, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support gives us the strength to keep bringing stories like this to life, tales that echo across time, across deserts and dust, straight into the heart. Click that subscribe button and help us share the next legend of the Wild West. Because here at Wild West Legends, every story is more than just a tale, it's a legacy. Thank you for riding with us.